given the nature of the voting system that we have, that Restore is sort of doing its patriotic duty by keeping not only that seat Labour, but also giving Labour a leader who, in contrast to their current Premier, has a pulse, is able to communicate, is probably the most amiable face of whatever this sort of soft left, slightly indefinable Labour Party we currently have. So that would be the upshot of it, but it's a fascinating kind of snapshot.
He doesn't mention some very important things, though. He doesn't mention the scale, magnitude of illegal migration, and he doesn't mention housing at all. Tony Blair built fewer houses in the entire New Labour period than Thatcher did per annum.
It was extraordinary in and of itself, the fact that the leader of the party and the sort of chief executive of the party were married anyway, even had there not been this level of obvious corruption. That was something that a lot of people were asking questions about. Hello and welcome to the Spiked podcast. I'm Fraser Myers, thrilled as ever to be joined by Spike's editor Tom Slater.
Hello.
And delighted to be welcoming the leader of the Social Democratic Party, William Clouston. Welcome.
Good to be here, guys. Thank you.
Thanks for being here. We've got plenty to discuss today. We'll be talking about the Makerfield by-election, the return of Tony Blair, and the downfall of Nicola Sturgeon and her husband. But before we get into all that, I just wanted to let everyone know we've got an extra special offer on at the moment. If you donate £40 or more to Spiked, you'll get one of these special edition Brexit 10-year anniversary pint glasses. So you can literally raise a glass to Brexit with us. Have a look on the website. Go to spikes-online.com/support to find out how you can make your donation. You'll obviously get this amazing gift, and you'll be helping to keep Spiked alive and thriving, and perhaps to another 10 years, keeping the Brexit sphere alive. So yeah, go to spikes-online.com/support to find out more. So the Makerfield by-election is hotting up. There's been a lot of muckraking around the contest. People have been digging into the social media pasts of various candidates. There's been a lot of focus on what the Reform candidate Robert Kenyon has said in particular. Andy Burnham is, of course, looming large there. He is expecting to use this to become Prime Minister if he wins. What are your first initial impressions of this campaign as it really gets underway?
Well, it's a bit cynical, isn't it? You just get someone to move out of the way and I become Prime Minister and no one's voted for me. That's a little incongruous. I suspect he probably will win. Actually, it's a seat that Reform ought to win on the demographics and on their performance in local government and on Brexit voting, etc. So they really ought to win, but I don't think they will. I think Labour will win it probably quite easily. Probably two factors in that. First, the Burnham factor, which is obviously there. I mean, he's a Everton supporter from Liverpool, and he's Manchester, so he's got the vibe, and a lot of people do respect him. And I find him quite innocuous. I'm not sure he'd be a brilliant Prime Minister, but I quite like his transport policies. I think, urban transport and trains are very important. So I've always supported him on that. And the other factor, of course, is that the right is deeply split. I mean, people forget about the Tories, actually.
Yeah.
Remember
barely
the Tories
a factor,
there,
yeah.
but they'll probably get a few hundred votes. They're pretty knackered there. But Restore Britain's candidate is polling usually at sort of 7%, which is pretty good, actually. That's very good, and it's big enough to split the right. And you'll have noticed, actually, the vehemence of the hatred between, Restore and Reform online. It's absolutely incredible and intense. And actually, some of it is pretty unedifying, actually. And I've got friends in both parties. So it's interesting. So for that reason, I think Burnham probably wins. Yeah.
It's interesting. There have been polls that quite literally show this is Restore as a potential spoiler, with Burnham and Labour on 43%, Reform on 40%, Restore on 7%. Okay, that's actually higher than a lot of us would have expected, but not even close to winning. But still enough to take the election victory away from Reform, keep the Labour Party going for a bit longer, give it a little rebrand under Andy Burnham, keep that knackered vehicle on the track longer than it deserves to be. I mean, what do you make of it, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, time will tell, and we'll see what happens on polling day. Also, strange things can be thrown up in by-elections that wouldn't be replicable at a general election, I think it's fair to say. But I think as soon as Restore launched, it was clear that one or two things were going to happen. Either it would fail to break through, that it wouldn't be able to break out of the kind of echo chamber in which it was born, or it would to a modest extent, but enough to be a spoiler for reform. I mean, I think those have always been the two potential outcomes, and it seems like in Makerfield it's sort of in the balance. I mean, it's interesting that you talk to a lot of people involved in this race that they're surprised that the Restore number is that high. They wonder if it might come down. Who knows? That the Restore obviously throwing absolutely everything at this in a way that they wouldn't be able to if it was a national election. But it does look like, and you know, given the nature of the voting system that we have, that Restore is sort of doing its patriotic duty by keeping not only that seat Labour, but also giving Labour a leader who, in contrast to their current premier, has a pulse, is able to communicate, is probably the most amiable face of whatever this sort of soft left, slightly indefinable Labour Party we currently have. So that would be the upshot of it. But it's a fascinating kind of snapshot of the nature of how politics on the right is starting to fracture. The question is to what extent, I suppose, and we'll find out not too long from now.
And of course, we will have no idea what kind of Prime Minister Burnham is going to be, because he has flip-flopped on just about everything. The most recent flip-flop from the vantage point of recording this podcast, I'm sure there will have been more in between us recording this and this coming out, is that he has changed his mind. He used to believe that migrants should be given benefits from day one from arriving in the country. That shouldn't be the case. He doesn't want to change the law on that. I think the Express counted 8 flip-flops on everything from Brexit to single-sex spaces. I mean, this is... He is shaping up to be essentially Starmer 2.0 in many ways. It doesn't really have a strong set of beliefs that is going to give us an idea of what kind of Prime Minister he'd be.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, it's not good for the country. I mean, it gives them a little bit of a stay. And he's a better communicator and probably more likeable from a sort of public point of view. But no, I don't know. I mean, and he said, you know, very stupid things about the bond market, and he's the industrial strategy which they're promoting and boosting Manchesterism. If you look at the detail of that, there's not much in it actually. Most of Manchester's growth isn't manufacturing industry, it's services and housing actually, which they're boosting by giving consents to foreign conglomerates to build huge blocks. So no, there's not much. If you sort of dig under the surface, there's not really very much there. And I agree with you. I think it'll give it a little bit of a stay, but it won't. All the fundamental problems that are baked into its glide path are there. I give it 6 months or a year, it'll be in the same predicament probably.
Everyone here at Spiked is a big fan of Rod Liddle, the Times columnist and returning Spiked podcast guest, and I'm sure that you are too. If you're a fan, you need to listen to his Times radio show. Rod is on Times Radio every week from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. So it's 3 hours of really spiky conversation with big name guests confronting all the big issues, and you will not hear the usual line that you get everywhere else in the mainstream media. Plus, it's not all heavy lifting. There's music recommendations from leading artists and a TV review, so you know what to watch and what to avoid. So don't miss Rod Liddle on Times Radio every Saturday from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. And you can listen on your digital radio, via your smart speaker, or via the free Times Radio app. And Tom, should we talk a bit about Robert Kenyon and his social media past? Because a few spicy tweets have been uncovered and posts on various forums. Reform standing by their candidate, saying this is just, you know, how people talk in the real world. I think that's a fairly reasonable defence on a lot of these things.
I mean, I think that it's clear that the opponents of reform in this race and the newspapers who are dredging up all these comments feel like cancel culture is all they've got left, really. Generally speaking, on paper, in terms of what he's saying and doing now, he's not in any way a kind of candidate who would frighten the horses, any kind of extremist by any stretch of the imagination. But he's been on social media for a number of years and said a number of things that really probably should be confined to the group chat, but he said actually out in public or on forums or whatever, some lewd comments, some sort of sexist jokes. But I think we're getting to the point now where if every candidate is subjected to this level of offence archaeology and pearl clutching, then only the weirdest people in the world will ever be able to become MPs. People who have never said a stray word, people who have never indulged in a slightly politically incorrect joke. That will become the starting point for whether or not you're allowed to be an elected representative. And I think reform are onto the right path here. You just stand by your man. You make clear that this is not really what he happened to find funny 5 years ago is not really what the election is about. And I think we spoke about it last week, but the level of desperation that you're sensing amongst either the newspapers that are reporting it or the kind of hope not hate style organisations who are providing them with these dossiers of information is getting a bit ridiculous. I mean, there was one the other week where they had suggested that he had advocated violence. Well, you click open the article and it said that it was during the early days of lockdown. Someone said, what should be done about lockdown breakers? And he said they should be waterboarded. To which Hope Not Hate reminded us that this was a form of torture, which is banned under international law. So there is this attempt to kind of just throw out absolutely everything at this because they've got no other arguments, I think. But I would be surprised if it was a factor in this election, because I think people realise there's much more at stake, and also are probably a little bit either sick with the kind of constant offence archaeology, or quite frankly are not paying that much attention to it.
And also, William, I mean, don't we need more people in politics that have come from an ordinary job who haven't necessarily been thinking for the past 20 years, I want to be in politics, therefore I must be the cleanest person possible, or I should be moderating my language 10 years in advance of looking for a seat?
Yes, the answer is yes. And actually, it's not just the Reform kind. I'm glad, by the way, Reform stood by him. They didn't used to be like that. I mean, go back a couple of years ago, they used to panic. Don't panic, and don't, you pick the candidate and within reason back them up. I don't think the voting public are too fussed about this, actually, this sort of thing. But I think it's the sort of thing that would probably dissuade nowadays people from coming forward. I mean, if every single candidate is going to be subject to, offence archaeology of this type, then it will dissuade some good people from coming forward. But you've got the same sort of issue actually with the Restore candidate, where Shepherd, she gave an interview, and because she wasn't right on top of every detail of the energy paper that had just been put out, she had criticism. I don't think that's valid. I think if you want Parliament to look different to the population at large, and you want it to be this weird 15% of people that have their own liberal views and sod the rest of the country, then continue. But it doesn't fuss me that you get people in Parliament that are a bit different in that way. So I think, again, they should back their candidates.
And it is also a slightly weird by-election in the sense that you have one candidate, Andy Burnham, who's running to be the Prime Minister. So he really should have all of his ideas worked out, whereas everyone else is just wants to be an MP.
There is a hurdle of the leadership. I mean, I don't know if he's going to emerge like the Tories used to, Alec Douglas Home emerging as without an election. That could happen, but I hope not. But there is an election. But yes, almost certainly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I suppose we should return to Restore just a little bit, because obviously that probably has been the big story this week, aside from what Robert Kenyon may or may not wanted to do with Carol Vorderman. The extra scrutiny that has been applied to Restore in some of the mainstream press in recent days, I think, will be quite damning for them, maybe not in this election, but in time. The fact that whilst Rupert Lowe himself is someone who's, broadly speaking, kind of politically indistinguishable from Nigel Farage, has talked to himself as a civic nationalist, and has, even on certain particular issues, almost been to, again, sounds kind of indistinguishable from existing Reform Party policy, to be perfectly frank. There is this kind of ferment around him online who are much more out there, much more extreme, much more unrepresentative of where the kind of British voting public are at. But I think particularly as Rupert Lowe has been giving a few more interviews and so on and so forth, you do just get the sense that this was a party that was born primarily out of a personal grievance between the two men, which I'm not going to relitigate, but the fact that he was, again, kind of chucked out of Reform in quite dubious circumstances, and that much of it flows from that. But I think when you go back to those comments that he made, which set all of this in train, saying that Reform was a one-man band, that it was messianic, that it was a protest party, I think at this point all of that feels doubly true of Restore in contrast to Reform. So as ever, this is going to be a key test of them, but it's going to be one which is a little unusual because of the nature of by-elections and the fact you can throw absolutely everything at it in a way that you wouldn't be able to if you were standing candidates across the country, as they claim they intend to do at the next election.
William, anything you want to add on Restore?
Well, I think you can throw everything you've got at a by-election and still fail, and actually post-Brexit Party Reform failed several times. And we beat them in Adrian shots quite easily, but no one got any votes. But so it's not quite as simple. I think their biggest challenge, I mean, theoretically there is space to the right of Reform. Their biggest challenge, which everyone knows, is a sort of one of clarity in controlling the people that are attracted to them on these issues of things like deport, remigration, because unless they're very careful, and I think they need to work out what the boundary is very rapidly and assert it, because the problem with things like that is not where it starts, it's where it finishes. and unless they're very clear, they will attract some unsavory elements, which they're aware of. But actually, you can have an articulate policy team, and you can make the case, but unless they're very clear on that, there'll be trouble ahead.
We're talking about someone who's made a very interesting and widely noted intervention into, if not the Makerfield by-election, but certainly the Labour leadership. Tony Blair. Blair is back. He's written a 5,500-word essay on the state of the nation, saying what Keir Starmer's getting wrong, what the other Labour leadership contenders are getting wrong, what the political class as a whole is getting wrong. Tom, what have you made of this? I mean, I've been slightly struck by the fawning praise for a lot of it, considering that some of it is actually quite confronting to the Liberal establishment, saying we should do whatever it takes to stop the boats. We should scrap net zero. You do think if one of us had said that, they'd wet their pants or go, start screaming at you. But Tony Blair gets to say it.
No, exactly. What is heretical and terrifying and populist from some quarters is bold and radical and pragmatic, or whatever word you want to apply to it when it's coming from Tony Blair. I mean, there is a certain section, particularly of the media class, who do basically just swoon whenever Tony Blair re-emerges from whatever underground lair in which he strokes his cat maniacally. But there's also a hell of a lot of, he's also coming for a hell of a lot of criticism, even from his sort of nominal allies on the right of the Labour Party, or the Blairite wing, I should say, of the Labour Party, who have even felt the need to push back, given this is basically in complete opposition to what the contemporary Labour Party stands for, which is a combination of welfarism, human rights law, and greenism. That really is their ideology, to the extent that they have one. It sort of unites the various quite fractious wings of the party in many respects. It's a little bit rich hearing Tony Blair lecture us on how broken our politics has become, and particularly because many of the areas, I mean, you take something like environmentalism, I mean, it was New Labour who said a lot of that in Tony Blair's time, but it's more pointedly, I think, in Gordon Brown's time, signing the Climate Change Act into law with cross-party support just before he leaves the political stage. So to turn around now and say all of this was a tremendous mistake is a little bit rich, but nevertheless, the stock clock is right at least twice a day, and I think it's telling that something as simple as, if you want a country to thrive, you need cheap and reliable energy sources, has become something which is met with such conniptions. Tells you how deep this groupthink on that particular question, but many others, goes now.
Yeah, I mean, well, obviously it's welcome that Blair is challenging groupthink on certain issues, and hopefully, he will persuade the political class on these things in ways that maybe other people can't. But it does feel as if a lot of what he's saying, or a lot of the brokenness of Britain, does go back to his time. Surely a lot of what he stands for, whether it's technocracy, globalism, these are certainly not the answers to our contemporary problems.
Yeah, that was the nauseating thing about it. The fact that, when he had the chance, when he had a large majority, he didn't practice what he now preaches. In fact, he paved the way for a lot of this. Obviously, he's right about the four main things he talks about. The fact that the Labour Party is deluded and a lot of progressives are deluded. Obviously, the problem of growing welfareism and the growing welfare bill being detached from the tax base. Correct about that. Correct about net zero, and he's correct about the open border and legal migration. He doesn't mention some very important things, though. He doesn't mention the scale, magnitude of legal migration, and he doesn't mention housing at all. I mean, I thought it was astonishing. So 5,700 words. I've read it twice. I read it twice to check that he didn't say anything about housing. I didn't think he didn't know rocked it, and he doesn't mention the word. And I think it just shows how, I think this is a man from the clouds. I think his head is in the clouds. The things that really animate him, the things that he really is fussed about, is Britain's standing in the world, their place at the table, international standing, and how other people look at us, international bodies and so on. That's really what he's fussed about. But to neglect to even mention the biggest sort of domestic macroeconomic issue, housing, look at the city we're speaking from, half of disposable income young people is just drained away to costs. No wonder there's no growth, because the household budget is so constrained because you haven't invested in housing. So he is right about the four things I mentioned. but he did nothing. He destroyed state sector capacity in house building. It was drained under Thatcher. The stat I love to bring up, which is true, you can check this. Tony Blair built fewer houses in the entire New Labour period than Thatcher did per annum.
Wow.
Per annum. So that's how much it was collapsed. So Blair took the Thatcher economic legacy entirely. He ate the whole thing, free trade, and the rate of deindustrialization was increased under New Labour. So he says at one point in the essay that, really it's military power and strength of the economy, i.e. industry, that determines your power in the world. Well, certainly our industry is largely responsible for the neglect because of power and energy and the fundamentals that we require. So true-ish at times, but just very irritating, to be honest.
But you're definitely right to say that this is about you do of course it's good that politicians think about Britain doing well in the world, and you often feel as if the current crop of politicians don't particularly care about that at all. The willingness of Keir Starmer, say, to give away the Chagos versus Tony Blair was quite upset having to hand over Hong Kong, and he said to his advisors, don't let me give away any more territory, Britain's too small. But for Blair it is about actually hanging out with the other leaders. I think that's why he was so eager for the UK to join the euro, not because it would be good for the economy, of course it wouldn't be, but because it would increase, because we'd be going to more international meetings, and that.
He's using metaphor. He wants a structured relationship with the European Union. What he means is high alignment. There's any rejoining or high alignment with rule taking or being a proper nation state. He doesn't want that. And he criticises insularity, mentions Blue Labour a couple of times, doesn't really talk about that very much. But actually, I would argue that if you genuinely want to reindustrialise, or you genuinely want to improve housing and the rest of it, you need a greater level of insularity. You need to have a domestic focus on what happens. And I just see the whole thing, his whole intervention is detached from the real material needs of British people.
Mm-hmm. I think that's fair to say. I think it was interesting how pointed it was as far as calling out the Labour Party explicitly, giving a series of interviews in which he pretty much said that Ed Miliband was living in fantasy land, criticising the current Labour Prime Minister, former Labour leader in the form of Ed Miliband. And I think it's just quite telling that Tony Blair is often talked up, understandably, as one of the most successful Labour Party politicians and prime ministers, but ultimately he's just a creature of sort of technocratic globalism. I mean, he came very close in the interview on the Today programme this week of admitting he doesn't really care who wins the next election, provided that they take up his ideas. And kind of on the face of it, you think that's fine. Who is so tribal that they would rather their team won, even if they were backing all of the wrong policies. But I think it is telling of the fact that whilst he might have came along as part of a particular intellectual clique at a particular time and took control of the Labour Party, really it was the kind of cementing and the coming to power of an ideology which kind of floats free of domestic democratic politics. It was something that just kind of emerged out of the establishment and it became the establishment very quickly.
Have you been surprised? I shouldn't be answering the questions. Yes, but have you been surprised how many people have lapped it up? I have. I mean, quite surprised. Some that should know better.
I've been surprised, yes, how people who should know better than to praise Blair. Also, people who I have seen go completely nuts if you criticise net zero, saying actually we should rethink this. So there's positives and negatives to
I think Blair, from Iraq and the rest of it, it's a disgrace. But arguably should be in jail. But the point is, just on the content, people have lapped it up. I'm quite surprised. Yeah. It's quite a superficial essay.
And of course, no Tony Blair essay would be complete without a demand for digital ID. He gets his bugbears in there, and that seems to be the thing that this isn't the first time he's resurfaced in recent years. It usually is to demand digital ID or vaccine passports or something of that nature. What have you made of that aspect of it?
Well, and AI is the through line of the essay as well, which I think is telling because when he brought out his book on leadership, which I did read as a sort of form of, I don't know, masochism or something. But it was, it's interesting because he has this preoccupation with technology, the technologies of the future. And it's this very almost predestined idea he has of politics, which is that there are these emerging technologies, they're going to reshape absolutely everything. And therefore that demands X, Y, Z policy. As a consequence of that, he's now gotten on to the fact that particularly because of the amount of computing power and energy you need to do AI at scale, that therefore we need to junk all of the net zero things. But it's again, I think it's bound up with people of that particular mindset, which is the idea that history and politics is only really going in one direction, that what people want is sort of irrelevant, political trends are irrelevant, cultural trends are ultimately irrelevant. The march of history is being laid out for us, and what we need to do is find the right policies that kind of fit into it. So I think and also to be frank, it seems like kind of scientific developments that he sort of barely half understands anyway, but it's just that's what he's very attracted
He
to.
famously didn't have a mobile phone, so it's not as if he's a particularly tech literate person, but he does see technology as this kind of force that can't be controlled or tamed or put in any particular, maybe in a more humanistic, progressive direction. Same thing with globalization. I mean, that's probably one of his most infamous speeches is, talking about, well, we've got to get, it's not going to wait around for us. The world is there for people who don't complain and who just get on board and suck it up.
This is what's happening whether you fuckers like it or not.
Exactly. Yeah.
The technology can't really be, the march of technology can't be restrained, but we can restrain the public.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, though. The thing that I find irritating is that he's guilty of the thing he accuses the Labour Party, and because the first part of the essay is about comms and superficial things, and talking about politics rather than policy. And he takes quite a high-minded view on that. But then he falls into exactly the same trap because the essay is just rhetoric. If he was serious, genuinely serious about something like housing or energy, he'd give us a little hint of how you would achieve it. Might just tell us how you could do it, mate. Because on housing, you have to know just the three things. Who's going to build them? How are you going to do them? What powers? And unless you can say that, you're not really contributing. And likewise, on energy, it's even worse, actually, because the train that is net zero and in expanding the grid for renewables is so you can see it being built, and the instability in the grid is just an ongoing problem. You can't flick your switch and just say, well, let's just stop. I mean, he may want to, but he doesn't show. But again, he doesn't show you how you would do this. So it's more comms,
and also very rich for him to say less. More on policy, less on politics. This is the government that invented spin. Should we talk about the Nicola Sturgeon, Peter Murrell scandal? One of the more amusing scandals of our time. So Peter Murrell, the husband of Nicola Sturgeon, they're now distant but still married, and also the chief executive of the SNP, has pleaded guilty to embezzling around £400,000 of party funds to spend mostly on luxury knickknacks. I mean, you've had the camper van was probably the most famous one that we kind of knew about that before. There's many questions asked about that, but there was this luxury camper van, a Jaguar in the drive.
The salt and pepper shaker.
The salt and pepper shaker, Lalique salt and pepper shakers worth
a couple of grand,
thousands of pounds. There was a designer bread bin, a ladder worth over £900.
Two women's umbrellas, I remember.
Two women's umbrellas, women's makeup, Grand Theft Auto 5.
Box set of ball. I mean, it's the whole kind of gamut, isn't it?
Yeah, the Fortnum and Mason advent calendar. I mean, it is a man of quite eccentric taste.
Yeah, it's a bit kind of confessions of a shopaholic, as you put it in the newsletter the other day. There's something almost quaint about it. I mean, it's outrageous. This money was earmarked for another independence referendum. This was raised from Scottish independence supporters themselves, who were asking a lot of questions for a long time about where this money had gone, and it turned out it had gone on this motorhome and the most expensive pen collection that part of Glasgow has ever seen. I mean, it's quite striking. You think if you were going to break the law in such a shameful fashion and take your own supporters for mugs, that you might get a few kind of private jet trips and villas abroad out of it, rather than just a series of knickknacks, as you suggest. But it's become another damning indictment of the SNP. I mean, obviously he was the chief executive of the SNP for many years, was married to Nicola Sturgeon, at least until the police investigation began. A lot of questions about what she did or didn't know, given the fact that she's now been pictured in front of various of these knickknacks. It was also responsible for signing off the accounts to mark her own husband's homework, essentially, and yet is now turning around and pretending that she knew absolutely nothing about this. So the kind of the most gentle reading where Sturgeon is concerned that you can take of this is that she was sort of woefully inept, didn't properly fulfill her duties. But I think on the broader picture, we could say it's become a symbol of how, for all the kind of ferment politically north of the border over the past 10 years or more, the whole kind of Scottish independence cause, as led by the SNP, has primarily delivered the people at the top of that party positions of power, influence, and in Murrell's case, some very expensive fountain pens, but has sort of ultimately failed to get their project over the line, or to deliver for the people of Scotland, whose outcomes on any kind of area you could wish to think about have gone down under this party's leadership rather than up.
And it was extraordinary in and of itself, the fact that the leader of the party and the sort of chief executive of the party were married anyway. Even had there not been this level of obvious corruption, that was something that a lot of people were asking questions about. Alex Salmond warned that this spells trouble for our movement. It is just bizarre, but I think, as you say, Tom, there's something quite rotten about the SNP, and possibly a fact out of the fact that they've basically ruled Scotland for as pretty much a one-party state for a significant amount of time now. That perhaps, does that breed a sense of complacency, a sense that the law doesn't apply to us, that we're never going to get kicked out? I don't know. What do you think, Will?
Yeah, I mean, I think it does all those things. And by the way, I don't think many people in the country actually believe the denials. Take them at face value, because for Sturgeon to show, it would ask a level of incuriosity about things that just normal people just don't do. Things just don't arrive from Mars, do they? And drop. Actually, unless you're the Prime Minister, then you get suits and you get ties and other things do actually just drop on you. But no, it's a pity. What's clearly true politically is that the independence movement, the SNP voter will vote SNP despite what goes on, and it is a sort of, Tom talks about my party, right or wrong. I think on that issue in that country, that electorate is prepared to, because they did quite well, and it's been common knowledge. And actually, in a country like Scotland with two big cities, it is common knowledge. It's common if you speak to people. So it is a little bit depressing that overrides and they don't get punished politically, but it's very bad. I think what's really bad about it is that it contributes to this atmosphere of you're all in on it. You've all got your hands in the till, and none of you could be trusted. So it's more grist to the mill of the 40% of people that vote.
Yeah. And I suppose it's a big knock as well to how significant Nicola Sturgeon had become in the sort of imagination of even the Westminster media set, being held up as someone who wasn't only sort of politically superior because she was nominally sort of centre-left and therefore a kind of thorn in the side of a wayward Tory government when they were in power, but also that kind of very moralising way in which politics was done. Boris Johnson's Tories, or the Tories in general, were this rotten, morally as well as politically bankrupt party. I think that halo is well and truly shattered now. I wonder if she would as easily be able to kind of shuffle into her next life, whether it's as a novelist as she seems to want to be, or as a kind of some sort of member of the kind of international NGO set, as it were.
But this is the thing I didn't go to, but she was at Hexham Book Festival the other day, and the public lapped it up and things, So, but I think that's tribal. I think that what's going on there is that she's progressive and she says the right things, and content doesn't matter very much, which is real pity.
I mean, there have been a lot of people defending her, saying that it's sexist to say that she could have had any involvement. She is not her husband, but she did lead the party.
Yeah, it would be sexist to say that she wouldn't notice. So it comes the opposite. It's ridiculous. No, the whole thing is very poor.
Thank you, Will. Thank you, Tom. Thank you to everyone at home. But that isn't everything, because we're going to be discussing on Spike Podcast Unlocked the Social Democratic Party and why it's filling a hole that's missing in British politics. Thank you so much for watching the Spike Podcast. We'll be back next week, so make sure you subscribe to the channel and click the bell so you never miss an episode. If you enjoyed the Spike Podcast, then why not check out what else our channel has to offer, from our documentaries to our weekly interviews and podcasts like The Brendan O'Neill Show. And if you're a Spike supporter, you can watch the second half of this episode by logging in on the Spike website. If you're not yet a Spike supporter, then why not sign up now? You'll get unlimited access to the website, ad-free reading, discounted tickets to our events, and so much more. So become a Spike supporter today by going to spiked-online.com/support. That's spiked-online.com/support.